Word from me only, just to let you know that the presentations will be on the app. So if you are concerned about missing something that's on the screen, please don't worry, they will be on the app. So we will keep the app alive as well for a considerable period after the event. So I'm going to pass straight across to Mike to do what he does best.
All right, thank you, Faye. So again, a reminder of where we're at. That was just a terrific overview to get us started. This next session is focused on how we're ultimately pricing underwriting risks, the core of what we do. And technology obviously is affecting these core functions just as they are all of the functions. But this really is at the heart of what can make or break us as an underwriting organization. And we're going to kind of come at it from a couple of different angles, given the panel that we've got here. It's going to be, let me introduce them quickly, and then we'll get on with it. This group will be chaired by Nick Charteris Black. Nick, you've got a tall order to match Bill's sense of humor, so we're looking for the wit from the British side of things. And Nick is managing director for EMEA for AM Best. To his left, Gunilla Heinetz-Birke from La Mobiliar, that great Swiss insure that's been doing a lot of innovative things, which we're going to hear more about. To her left, David DeSapos from the P&V Group in Belgium. We had another individual, Hassan Bashar, who was going to be on this panel and who was unable to be with us today. And then to the far left, Adam Levin, the chairman, founder of Cyber Scout, who will be talking about cyber insurance. So with that, Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning. I'd also like to extend my thanks to ICMIF for giving me the opportunity to chair this panel. AMS has been a supporting member of ICMIF for a number of years. This is actually, I think it's my fourth of the last 5 conferences, so great that it's in London and great to see you here all in London. Apologies for the weather, obviously, but it's what you would have expected, I'm sure. Unlike the last chair, well, there's a couple of things really. Obviously, I don't have American wit. We'll see whether we get any sort of British wit coming through or not. But I am clearly the least qualified person to be chairing this kind of panel on technology. Having said all of that, I do have 3 experts. I have an iPad down here, which I do know how to use, an audience brimming with questions, so what else could go wrong? Technology, maybe. So the format of this session is slightly different from the last one. We're actually going to have 3 presentations. They're going to be about 20 minutes each. We also hopefully moved to some interactive questions, voting, and then hopefully at the end we'll have some time for some more open discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to pass first to Gundula, who's going to deliver her presentation. I think she's going to stand up. So I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. So, welcome. First, I will introduce you in my world. It's Swiss Mobiliar. So that's the oldest private insurance company in Switzerland. We were founded in 1826, so we are more than 190 years old. So I'm not so old, but the insurance company is. So the first insurance cover was fire. And so we started then in the 20th century with household and also with life insurance. We are leading household liability for small and medium enterprises and life risk insurance. We have about 1.7 million customers, and we are growing over the market since more than 10 years. So more or less we are successful, I would say. And we are working still with tied agencies. We have 80 tied agents in all Switzerland, and we have a small agency in Liechtenstein. So we have 1 foreign agency. Sure, in general about cognitive computing, you heard already a lot. As the first session mentioned, and especially Andrea, already there are many emerging technologies. Regarding cognitive computing, for me, the future is now. We have to innovate ourselves and experiment with these technologies. We cannot wait. We heard this the last 2 days already, and especially in the last session, that we should start. I will give you a glance of our experience with one concrete example, a new tool for underwriting of small and medium enterprises. We can use it for starting a discussion with our clients, but also about dealing with the relevant coverages, and especially later on to mitigate the risks. We took 2 years ago the opportunity as an innovation group. We think, test, fail, and learn fast. 2 years ago, we started together with IBM and especially Andrea, thanks to you, our journey. We learned a lot about agile implementation and data-driven innovation. We inspired our business and getting more insights in this technology. And finally, yet importantly, we want to support in general evidence-based decision-making. As more services become digital and more devices become internet connected, more data is generated. You heard it already. This data gives tremendous opportunities to improve the decision-making through insights into historical data, what we did in the past already, and different other data sources. Maybe you know it already, that more than 80% of the data tends to be unstructured. A whole lot of pre-processing steps are necessary to transform these to values, to get a structure out of this. So traditionally, we work with structured data, but we have to use also unstructured information. You will see here some examples like free text or even images, videos or audios. And traditionally, our data are stored in databases, but that's not anymore the question. It is not possible to extract the information so easy out of this unstructured information. And I give you an example how we did it in Mobiliar. The transformation in general tends to be laborious, and it's applied to large data sets where faster methods are required than otherwise. Therefore, until now, we cannot use this relevant information because we have really to extract it. Therefore, cognitive computing comes in the game. That it's our solution. And I know it's a buzzword for many of you, but I think there is a lot behind. Cognitive computing and data analytics enable to harvest the information stored in semi-structured or unstructured data to get really insights and new services. As you already heard, cognitive systems forge a new partnership between man and machine. Especially Andrea told us that humans excel at common sense, morals, imagination, dreaming, or generalization. Cognitive systems excel at location knowledge, pattern identification, natural language, machine learning, or endless capacity. Though these systems don't sleep, they can work 24/7, so that's really great. They do our underwriting jobs when we sleep during night. We have to support, in general, our business people to getting these insights for their daily work. Or we try to support our management for strategic decisions. Data-driven decision-making means for us keep off or more keep off intuitive decisions. Our goal is make decisions more evidence-based in every core insurance process. We want to use every data sources, of course, which is allowed to use from a legal and ethical perspective. The power of machine learning and advanced analytics, I think you know it already from different consulting companies, but maybe also from your first experience. It drives us to the level of automatization and depth of analysis further to enable businesses to make more informed decisions. To be honest, making business decisions based on very simple statistics or simple data, it's also data-driven decision-making. That's not new. But the value here is the potential level of sophistication. You can do more, you get more insights out of this. Not only has the business the benefit because of information extraction from unstructured data, in addition, our customer, especially the companies, could get advice for risk mitigation and the relevant coverages. Cognitive services and cognitive computing is already here. You see here some everyday examples. So especially for spam protection or for voice assistance, or you can use image recognition, very easy. Everybody in your has more or less a smartphone, and you use it day by day. So cognitive computing is surround us every day. We use it every day, and so the question is not could we use it, but how should we use it in an insurance context? And the systems are built not every time high sophisticated. Cognitive services are built either with rule-based or with machine learning systems. So it's not every time that you have to use artificial intelligence or machine learning approaches. You can use also simply rule-based systems. Prominent examples for insurance are claims, especially fraud detection, but also underwriting and understanding the customer needs better. The use cases which I think have the biggest impact to the added value for us as an insurance companies are underwriting, maybe together with pricing, and then of course the claims handling. There we can really improve our processes very, very fast. However, as we heard already in the first panel, machine learning data science will not take over every aspect of our life soon. So they make our life simply easier. And I think we will never try to build or to create a do-it-all machine. It will not work, I think. And instead, I think it's important to take single pieces to optimize and to add to a larger whole. Now, I will introduce more the cognitive computing for an insurance-specific task for underwriting small and medium enterprises. Our vision was to support the underwriters from our company and the agencies in decision-making. We see it in the video now.
Meet Eva. She has experience as both an internal and external underwriter and wants to make an impact in her job. The problem is that she is spending a lot of time manually researching to respond to routine agent requests, considering a wide range of information, and chasing down best practices with experts. She needs a way to break through the unproductive cycles so she can focus on more challenging and value-added work. Luckily, she found IBM Watson. Watson's cognitive capabilities will enhance Eva's abilities to assess risk in a more fluid and successful manner by understanding what she is really looking for when she performs a query, pulling in information from a variety of internal and external sources, making connections with the data in a way that is useful and automated for Eva, and ranking coverage options from the proposed best fit. Furthermore, Watson continuously learns and therefore fosters the employee's knowledge. Through her enrichment with Watson, Eva will have a holistic view and can work more efficient and effective, as well as making profound decisions. Because she can do so much more independently, she will have time to focus on more value-added activities like interacting directly with customers or innovative projects. Eva is very excited and imagines how Watson will help propel her and her colleagues. More broadly across Moby, she envisions how agents can empower themselves by achieving more comprehensive search results independently. how claims can be enhanced by surfacing valuable circumstances in the claims notes, and how market management can quickly identify macro trends to propel sales activities. This is the potential that Eva can see with cognitive computing. It's time for a technology that truly uplifts the employees of Mobiliar. The question is, what can you see with Watson? Mobiliar Cognitive Computing, powered by IBM Watson.
So Mobiliar has recognized that the risk assessment becomes more difficult as companies expand activities in non-traditional areas. We hear it later. They could be drones, or in general, industries with high potential of cyber risk, or mixed offerings which were in the past not so established. Also, the sharing economy comes, and Mobiliar themselves support a peer-to-peer car sharing, and we have to think about how could be the relevant coverage. In general, small and medium enterprises in Switzerland account for a disproportionately large share of new jobs in Switzerland. 99.8% of companies are SMEs, which account for 68% of jobs. SME face many challenges for survival. Less than 50% survive for more than 5 years. And only a fraction develop into high-growth firms. SMEs are very vulnerable to economic crisis, and they have difficulties to obtaining loans compared to large companies. At the same time, you heard it in the video, underwriters spend a significant amount of time responding to various low-value-added questions. Furthermore, as it's challenging to access information stored in different systems and service the customer efficiently. So we decided to take the opportunity to rethink the insurance process new by enabling cognitive computing. As you see, we called it our cognitive expert advisor for underwriting SME, so it is introduced in our company with this name, and we will help empower the underwriters, not to replace the underwriters. We will help them, allowing them to shift their time focus from providing low-value support for the agencies to more high-value guidance. With machine learning, clustering of companies' activities against a large set of data risk coverages, and with the deeper insights from unstructured data, it will help us drive more efficient and consistent decisions. And we contribute, of course, or we try to do it, to the long-term better understanding of our risk and customer, and of course, to a profitability growth. The benefits, you see it here, are obvious, and these benefits are committed from the business leader. It's not an idea of an innovation group. We brought in and bring different skills together, and they say, okay, we will increase our efficiency for more than or 50%. The underwriters get an overview in a simple dashboard so that they can make informed-based decisions or evidence-based decisions. What does it mean in detail? You see here a screen of our real running system, and we have here our two main functionalities. First, the recommendation of the most likely insurance coverages based on the description of the activities of one single small and medium enterprise, and the second, provide additional information about current, prospective, and similar clients. What does it mean in detail? That means for risk code matching, if we find for enterprise the correct risk code, so we have in our company more than 1,600 risk codes, and nobody can know everything. But if you find the right one, most of the coverages are predefined. With analyzing unstructured information from the commercial register of whole Switzerland and the notes from the underwriter, the system is recommending 5 risk codes. You see it here in the middle. And it shows you also, in a very easy way, the results with the calculated confidence level. So if the risk score is likely the right, then of course you see 80% or 85% that is right. And other risk scores are maybe not so good or not right, then you see it also immediately. And after that, the user could choose the right one, or can give a direct feedback to the system. And that means teaching or training the system. And that is the difference now. So we say not, oh, the system is stupid. We can help the system that it becomes better and better. And we learned here that we have 3 different risk clusters, risk code clusters. More often used risk codes. So we have an accuracy from more than 85%. Often used risk codes that are about 60% accuracy, and seldom used are best effort approach. So we try, of course, to make them better, but we have not enough data to train the system. So in general, we learned also about our own portfolio a lot, because we saw that we have really good risk, which we could describe and compare, but we have a lot of risk where we have maybe 1 or 2 in the whole portfolio. And that's then, of course, not so easy to teach the system. As I mentioned before, the second main functionality is risk like this. The system displays, in comparison to the whole portfolio, 3 similar customers or risk. You see it on the right in the bottom side. So it's not so huge, but maybe you can imagine. You are a human. Normally, it is based on risk code and the number of employees. However, you could choose other options as yearly revenue. And then you can compare the enterprises, and you get also additional suggestions. In general, it supports the underwriter for make better decisions and consult the customer better. And this approach, risk like this, of course, you can use for other concepts. Maybe customer like this, object like this, also claims like this. If you have to understand this similarity match once and you implemented it once, then of course you can transfer to other objects. And the system provides another main functionality. We called it relevant documents, because often the user have no time to search for the right information or document. The system extracts relevant information in context of one specific case and suggests special and individual conditions. And that's for us important, because we have to understand which conditions could be relevant for this special coverage or risk. Imagine drones. Maybe not everybody or not every underwriter used already this coverage, and then he can look which contract we have already in the system and what is an expert suggestion for this special condition. Underwriters find best practices or notes from other colleagues, but also list documents. A funny story, one underwriter found a document which he was searching for last 5 years, and he was surprised that the system found it, so he was really happy about it. Beside this, we implemented a general search to get efficient access of documents with underwriting-specific filters in the relevant data sources. As I mentioned before, the sources are all text documents. In addition, we support the interaction, collaboration, knowledge transfer through input of comments and tags. So that's an additional part that we try to bring this new culture in our company. So of course, we use both. I go not deeper in the technology. We use both machine learning and rules because you have to look what is good for your solution, and not we make all this machine learning or all this image recognition. You have to find the right technology for your problem and solve it. So, as IBM define cognitive computing as creating new partnerships between people and computers. So for us, it is the advisor for underwriting. And as I said before, we not replace our employees. We did in the last 2 years a journey, really exciting journey, from defining use cases and also, of course, benefit cases when we understood the problem, to implementing the first pilots. We have a pilot now here running, or that is a system running already, and we have pilot done also in claims. But it's important that the pilot, if you have it first, the humans can train or teach the system and finally bring it in production. And now we are on this period where we bring this solution to our agencies. And we hope they are excited too. For them, it's not important that it is machine learning behind. For them, it's important that they get support for their work. My lessons learned for you are: start your cognitive journey now. As Andrea already mentioned, think big, start small. It's not anymore a question. You can enhance your employees with powerful systems, and we could be responsible for the human-centric usage of such a technology. I believe it is time to show the society, but also our employees or our customer, what it means, responsible usage of cognitive computing. And the second, educate yourself and your manager. Cognitive computing, machine learning, natural language processing is new for the business. Often there are under or overestimation of such a system. Yes, try it out. Make proof of concept. Demonstrate it to your colleagues. And then maybe you come to better implementation. Method is important. No unique product. We did it with Watson. We were successful. And maybe you find another solution which is also successful. The second, and I think really important one, is address the fears of the employees. We heard it already in the first session. We had the question, will the robots take my job? Yes, of course, maybe the tasks were not so, or a little bit stupid, were not so really creative or complex. Employees who fear machine learning and cognitive computing will not help you. And then they don't talk anymore to you. Then you have so different cluster. Talk to the user. Explain it easier. Optimize it and keep it in mind what is the relevance for the business. The users at the end have the workflow that they have to fit in. So you have to work with them, otherwise you are lost. And the third one, new discussion topics are rising. We had it already the last 2 days and today. So what could be the next topic in this context? Of course, ownership of data, ethics, legal regulation, but now a little bit deeper also algorithm bias. So, or is good enough really good enough? For example, good enough. No cost for a restaurant recommender. Then it gives you a wrong recommendation. For a decision where it costs millions, recommend wrong insurance coverage or wrong therapy, damage may be much higher. It really takes a lot of data to make our systems well. And I think it is important to start the discussion now. Thank you.
Thank you, Gundler. I think that was sort of excellent in terms of bringing down the discussion to the next level. There's some really sort of live examples. My only concern actually is in 2 years' time, are we going to be at the ICMIF IBM conference? But sure, IBM will be very pleased about that. But I'll just perhaps see a lot of questions coming in. Some of these questions arrive, you've only been standing up for 10 seconds, so I don't know how that happened. But that's right. But of a theme, perhaps just take one now before we move on to David, and they are of a theme. And you touched on this, I think, several times, but just to pose it again to you. So the question, this question, which is an example of 2 or 3 similar ones. So how do you build algorithms that don't bias against customers, and how do you maintain control over decision-making tools that we humans can't compete with in terms of their ability to compute large amounts of information. Would you like to say a few words on that before we...
Yeah, also in general, so the humans train the system, so they have already the control. It is, we call it supervised learning. So it's not everything is in the system itself. And of course, then we have experts, underwriter experts, and they look at the results, at the decision in a frequently time. And so we see if the system works fine. And of course, you can take the data out so that you have the data and you can retrain the system. Then you can see is there some changes and what happens with the system themselves, so itself.
Okay, thank you. I've got an excellent question here about pricing, but I won't ask it, but I will use that as a segue to David's presentation, which I think touches on this topic, so we'll look forward to hearing from you, David.
Yes. So first, I will speak in French, because they asked me to speak in French, so everybody can take his headset. It's better now than later.
Good morning. I'm absolutely thrilled to be with you today. By preparing for this presentation with Jan Struvens, I'd like to thank him most warmly for his assistance. I went back a few years and I was quite struck by the changes that have taken place. I don't know what you think, but what's happening today, as far as I'm concerned, has made this a most interesting time to live in terms of insurance and pricing. When I read actuarial studies, I was taught classical and statistic models, and at the time we spent a lot of time writing up formulae on paper and then trying to program them in Visual Basic. So I tried to see to it that these formulas were not too complex, because programming took up a lot of our time and the calculation times were horrendous. Insurance in those days was quite an established sector. Financially speaking, was doing rather well, and it was looking to a very promising future, and the actuarians were the kings of the world at the time. They already were well positioned within the company even before they started working. But this was 20 years ago. In the meantime, a lot of things have changed, as you will have understood. Before I start my presentation proper, I'd like to start off by presenting my group. I'm sure you've all heard about P&V, but perhaps less familiar with the details of our group. Now, I'd like to emphasize certain aspects, because the P&V group is based on a number of values, which I think is important, especially in an era of technological change, to remind us of. It was set up in 1907, and since its inception, the group wanted to defend values such as solidarity, proximity and cooperation. So the P&V group is a Belgian group and remains a Belgian group. Our focus is to give maximum protection to maximum number of people at affordable terms, and especially for the most impoverished of us. And as products become increasingly sophisticated, it's become a real challenge for us to be able to continue to serve our customers. We're a general insurance company, non-life, life, which we distribute using 3 channels: brokers, exclusive agents, and direct brokerage. And we reinvest in our community, and we also invest in a foundation. We want to encourage active citizenship and avoid social exclusion. We are becoming increasingly modern as a group. We're trying to catch the train before it leaves the station. And we're developing insurance techniques which are as modern as possible. So therefore, we are keeping a very close eye on current affairs and technological developments. I'm not going to go through the figures. We are the 6th biggest insurance company in Belgium, and I must say things are looking good as far as we're concerned. Now, there are all sorts of things that are happening on our market. This is something that's not going to sound as very revolutionary as far as you're concerned. A lot of things are happening, and they affect our business and the way we do business. So it's a bit like all the certainties that I had when I read actuarial studies at university were sort of dwindling away. Look at climate change, the last hurricanes, the earthquake in Mexico, 84 to $100 billion. That's the worst case scenario, and this is going to affect all our balance sheets because this is going to be passed on to our insurance policy premiums. The second other important chapter, everything that's to do with sensors. These technologies are all over the place in your smartphone. Your phone keeps a record of all sorts of stuff. And this is used in machine learning and supervised learning and artificial intelligence. Now I'm told how much time it's going to take me to get to the office. I didn't ask for anything, and I realize with some trepidation that it knows the way I get to the office every day. Everything is recorded, every move. You have domotics, you have telematics in your car. As far as we are concerned, insurance companies, increasingly automobile manufacturers use these technologies that record all the data that's to do with your car or mode of transport. And these manufacturers are coming together to create this big database so as to be able to sell on these data later on, which makes us even more vulnerable and fragile because we're at the end of a value chain, which is not a value chain that we can control from the beginning to the end. So big data is here to stay. We've talked about it. It's what the future is all about, and it's a gold mine as far as we're concerned. Why? Because big data and the knowledge of our customer, know your customer, is our core business, and the closer we can come to the details of covering the risk, the better we'll be able to set a right price. But we need to remain agile and assimilate all this change, digest all this change, and this is something complicated for some companies, which means that there's another trend on the horizon, i.e. the new industry players, the new startups that are penetrating the market, that are attacking us or helping us, because that's also the case in some of our areas. Now, what's interesting is that the insurers have understood this, because today investments on the up in all the startups, and in 2016 we're talking about 1.17 billion that have been invested in fintechs, and for most of these investments they are to do with startups dealing with big data and artificial intelligence and all that surrounds those two topics, and the Internet of Things, of course. So a lot of threats perhaps on the horizon, but it's a fantastic time, the one that we're living in. It's an interesting time that we're living in, and it's a time where we can prove that we are real entrepreneurs. I'll quickly walk you through this slide because we've touched upon it quite a great deal, the development of major technologies, and this is where there's exponential growth. We've talked about exponential growth in major technologies, machine learning, bots, artificial intelligence, deep learning. These are the latest buzzwords, and we see increasingly that big data on all these machine learning and artificial intelligence are coming together. Why? Because our capacity to analyze and process the information is increasingly limited, so we need all these technologies to be able to analyze and interpret and use and mine these data that we get from these technologies. So this convergence is going to lead to changes which are going to affect the whole industry, driverless cars, new consumption behavior, the sharing economy, whether we're talking about cars, houses, or any other practices, financing modes, innovation in the field of health, information, and the way politics are conducted. All this affects us already today. So that's an old slide. Allow me to walk you through this one, rather, Big data, we talked a great deal about big data. The difficulty with big data are the 5 V's. The first V is volume, V for volume. You've heard about zettabytes. I never thought that this term existed before I prepared my presentation. The second V is a variety, the kind of information that we get machine to machine, human to machine, or human to human. This is a tremendous set of data. The speed, V for velocity, the velocity of the transmission of the data today on YouTube. 48 hours of new video are downloaded every minute. You imagine the kind of information that we're passing on every single day. Another interesting aspect, the quality of the data. All the data that we receive are very often bad quality, and this also goes for insurers, because we need to keep an eye on this, because this is going to affect us quite significantly on the investments we're going to have to make so as to correct the data. And then value, V for value. Increasingly, all these data are creating a colossal market, a huge market, a humongous market. And most of the data that we use, most of us, are data that are generated by third parties. And these third parties sell on the data, and therefore they are integrating our value chain. So the long-term risk, as far as insurers are concerned, is to not be able to continue to control our pricing systems because of the cost of all these data and the integration of all these other parties. We've talked about technology, and then we'll come back to this later. We've talked about the new consumer habits, new customer behaviors. Customers increasingly well-informed interact with their insurance company. Increasingly, they can recommend your products and services or not recommend them. And this is entirely true for the new generations. And we've seen this in all our apps and all our web apps. This is increasingly the case. Likes, not likes. It's increasingly important in a sector like ours, where the only contact we have with the client is when they sign the policy, which is not always a very pleasant moment, when they have to pay out the premium every year and when there's a claim. So it's not the best time really to have a contact with your client. But the great advantage that thanks to these new technologies, we can develop new contacts with our clients and develop new relationships with our clients. Banks have understood this, and I've given you a few statistics of development since 2012 of the propensity of people to integrate our digital value chain. The only thing that's going down in Belgium is buying a product online. Perhaps this is different in your country, but in our country, as far as insurance products are concerned, most of the selling, most of the transactions are carried out by brokers. So direct sales doesn't go down very well in Belgium, at least. And you see that everywhere else, digital is the name of the day. And everywhere we see that new startups are becoming integrated in this new value chain, and they're offering products and services, whether we're talking about claim settlement, underwriting, whatever. Now, we'll get to pricing. I know what you're all waiting for, pricing. Pricing of all this technologies, of all these changes in terms of big data have naturally significantly impacted our price determination and our price ratio. Everything that's to do with pricing, and globally speaking, everything that's to do with the facilitation of the underwriting process represents 14 base points on the combined ratio of a company. That's enormous. This means there's quite a lot at stake here to try and use big data for most of our transactions and everything we do. The second point, this is a survey conducted by a major consultant. You see the competitive edge that a new player could have vis-a-vis an established company is colossal in terms of expenses, because these expenses can reach between 16%, 22% less than what a traditional insurance company would have to pay for. Pricing now. Lots of opportunities when it comes to pricing. Lots of opportunities. Big data and predictive analysis of our insurance companies is a fantastic way of defining new pricing modes in an innovative fashion. It was impossible to imagine coming up with prices to do with usage. Now, the combination of internal and external data allows us to better identify the risk. Today, a survey is being conducted with the University of Leuven on climate change, which we have developed using the sensors that were made available to our clients. And the use of vehicles and the data that we get from the use of vehicles is far more telling than the age of the driver or the age of the vehicle. So in the pricing system, we have an increasing amount of data which are far more relevant and which allows us to better identify the risk involved. This brings us into a sort of spiral which could spiral out of control insofar as it could lead us to a price war. And this means that it could also become a threat so far as those people who don't want to be part of the system could be ejected from the market or generate anti-selection when it comes to advantages. So it's very important indeed to keep a close eye on developments and, as Gundula has said, to throw in a bit of ethics into the pot. So new technologies allow us to do better pricing, but also to come up with more interesting value propositions. This is a slide from the World Economic Forum 2015, and it highlights the impact you can have on the value chain and on the value propositions that we make to our clients. There are three kinds of improvements, three opportunities. We can better assess the risk profile of the customer during the length of the contract. And secondly, in interaction with the client, we can improve the relationship and allow us to know our client better and therefore to better assess pricing. First example of this application of new technologies, and you know what this is all about, pay as you drive. This is something that we're going to initiate a very short term, and using new technologies, using new data, we can develop new offerings, products and services alike. Whether we're talking about pricing, because I said by using telematic data in our pricing decision, we can calibrate the risk and vary the price when it comes to third-party liability and use of the vehicle. I'm not talking about behavior here, but if you use a motorway or a country lane, or the fact that you drive more often than not on the weekend rather than the weekdays, then the tariff could vary from year to year based on these elements. The second element, which is very important in terms of insurance, which allows us to do a better job in terms of prevention. Thanks to the data we get, we can send warnings to our clients. We can also tell them, be careful, there's going to be black ice on the roads. Be careful, you're driving too fast. Be careful. Though this allows us to have interactions with our clients and to explain to them that prevention is the name of the game, and we can develop services and support. You've got the traditional services, assistance, road assistance, but increasingly, and that's what's very interesting, that using these new technologies and data, we can create services jointly with other partners. Today, we have a partnership with a car manufacturer. With the same data, with the same box, we can gather data to keep the maintenance records up to date and to do prevention as well. It's interesting for the client because the way he drives his car is going to impact his fuel consumption. So we can give them advice as to the way in which they use their cars and how to get more out of their car. So this is an example for cars, but we're also working with a startup that's developed a way where they can sense whether there's water dripping on the third floor or in the basement. So this is to do with the use of water. So we can send an alert, be careful, your water meter is going to give you an extraordinary reading, because this is going to increase your water bill, and therefore can get the client to call in a repairman far more quickly than in the past, call your plumber to fix the drip. So all this data could be useful to develop new products and new services, and therefore to adapt our pricing system in a more dynamic fashion. Now, dynamic pricing. This very interesting subject as far as I'm concerned. Dynamic pricing is what we also call real-time pricing or yield management. This allows you to set prices in a flexible fashion based on supply and demand. This technique is used by companies that have overheads and fixed capacities that sell non-stockable products based on the average price between supply and demand, the occupancy rate of a hotel room, or the number of available seats left on a plane. If a plane seat is not sold or a hotel room isn't sold, that's it. It's the end of the day. So you're better off selling it at a small price than not selling it at all. This is a technique that was developed in the United States of America in the 80s in the air transport field, and it's been used also in railways and catering and car rentals. So new sectors have been joining the fun in the UK. 3 companies are, in fact, actively looking at the search pricing model, where you increase prices if there's a strong surge in demand. According to the UK press, these 3 supermarkets are conducting services to adapt electronic prices. So in real time, they could adapt prices based on demand. So you could imagine you walk along to your supermarket and your price of your can of beans is going to change simply because there's been a lot of people who want full English breakfast and suddenly want to buy more baked bean tins. So in terms of insurance, this is something relatively new. It's not really developed, but we don't think that it's going to take up a lot of time before this becomes fashionable and develop systems and algorithms that could analyze in real time these data and come up with a reasonable quote, especially with the emerging of new technologies and the pay-as-you-drive system or pay-as-you-use system. So you could imagine of real-time apps based on what your sensor in your car detects. Well, today you're smoking, at the same time you're looking at your mobile phone, and at the same time you're exceeding the speed limit. You'd have an increase of your premium, instant increase. So could imagine that your price of your premium would really increase, and this, I'm sure, is going to serve as a deterrent. In another area, our premium prices could be adapted. We adapt these once a year, usually, or every second month, or once a month. Perhaps in the future, we could adapt these premiums based on the risk that's integrated into the system. So our premiums would be adapted every time there's a new risk that's detected. I'm going to show you something slightly different, something that we're currently working on, and it's relatively complicated. So what you see here is the dynamic pricing system. What we want to do within the P&V group is to vary the discounts that we grant our clients. These discounts are based on the broker's management decisions and based on the fact that they're trying to explain the premium residual that's not in the pure premium calculation. So it's relatively arbitrary, but this can be the case, at least in our country. So what we want to do, we want to use 2 elements. We want to vary the discount based on 3 criteria. The first criterion is the value of the customer. the value of the customer in the system. The second criterion, what's his likelihood of coming down? And the third criterion, the network benchmarking. So the principles are as follows. We're going to calculate, to start off with, the value of the client in real time because the client is already with us, or in a predictive fashion based on values that we have in our portfolio, in a comparative fashion based on similar risks or similar type risks. Today, we come to the end of this stage, the lifetime value of a client, and then the likelihood to lapse. And the third criterion, I'll come back to this later because it's slightly more complex, is the automatic benchmarking system. So it's a bit complicated, the slides, but it does explain what we're about. You have a representation of all our clients on two axes. The first axis on the left-hand side is the value of the client. The second axis on the horizontal one is the likelihood to lapse. Today, we grant a discount, which is totally arbitrary, based on the broker's decision. But it's possible that tomorrow, based on the following factor, if the client is the top right-hand corner of the client, he's very valuable, but at the same time, the likelihood to lapse is very great. If you're on the left-hand side, you are not really valuable, but the likelihood to lapse is very low. So we intend to give discount to the customer right at the top of the right-hand side. At the same time, we don't want to see the discount diminish the value of the client over much. This is going to help us better define our business. Then final point, everything that's to do with automatic benchmarking. There's no point in granting a minus 20% discount to a client if the market is going to go down minus 10%. So unfortunately today in Belgium, the aggregators and comparators don't exist, or not enough of them. So we're based on data to do with brokering. And these data are biased because brokering today, or the agent, has underwriting capabilities which are specific to every company. So it's extremely complicated to understand the tariffs. So we try and do some reverse engineering as far as tariffs are concerned, but extremely complex because in-depth segmentation, it's very difficult, especially when we try to do this to find how the tariffs are arrived at, especially those of our competitors. So this, I think, is what we need to go for, and I'm sure we'll be able to achieve this within the next 2 years, at least in production. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I think I've gone way over the time allotted to me, sorry. I'd just like to point out that all these technologies offer tremendous opportunities to insurance companies in terms of pricing, but they also raise a number of questions. How to continue to guarantee that our values are adhered to given this increased segmentation? How are we going to manage the fact that future data are going to be sold by third parties, which makes us dependent upon these third parties? Finally, how are we going to ensure cyber security and total transparency to our members? We have to answer these questions. I don't have the answers yet, but I think it's up to us to try and find these answers and use the answers in ethical ways and in total transparency so as to be able to sell insurance products at an affordable terms to a maximum number of people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, David. I don't know what that sounded like in French. The English version was excellent, so well done to the translator at the back of the room. Just before we lead on to the third presentation, which is on a slightly different topic, and we are indeed tight on time, perhaps we'll just run. We have 2 interactive questions for this session, so maybe if we could bring up the first of those. You guys will be sitting here for the past hour, so whether this can magically appear, I do not know. Do I have to press anything? Here we go. So you can see the question for yourselves. How does big data fit into your current strategic planning? As ever, you've got 5 options, A to E, and please go ahead and vote. So there you go. So C leading, we're discussing how to build it into our operations right now, or it's dropping as we speak. Any surprises, you two, from that response? Would you intuitively that seems about right? Still moving around a little bit, but I think actually D has picked up a bit.
That is great. The
Sorry?
option D. It's great, the option D. So we are in the middle.
Yeah. Yes. Bit more progress.
Yeah.
All around. So haven't quite got to E, but certainly moved a long way on from A and B. Okay, thank you. And then the second question, which very relevant to today's presentation, is this one. So in what area might your organisation first or make use of cognitive computing, artificial intelligence? And again, 5 options. I think David pointed out that pricing wasn't actually there, but I guess underwriting is pricing, part of underwriting clearly. So again, please go ahead and vote. Well, there you go. Looks like underwriting, pricing is leading the way. I did have a question here, actually. I'm not actually going to pose it in the interest of time, but it was very early on, actually, and I think you've kind of answered it, David. It was, do you foresee a world where big data drastically reduces or even removes uncertainty when pricing risk? Well, I think the latter was possibly slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I thought your slide in particular, which I think was sourced from elsewhere, but it showed the impact on the combined ratio overall of different elements, obviously including involving dynamic pricing and other concepts. So we are indeed, as I said, tight on time, and I know that Adam was actually up till about 4 in the morning finishing his script, so we do need to give him due time. This is going off on a slightly different tack. I think we've managed to probably avoid, if that's the right way, probably not, of putting it, the term cyber risk and security, which certainly pervades most of the insurance-related conferences I go to these days, so far. But not to disappoint, I think Adam is going to take the stage to give his thoughts on those 2 topics. So over to you, Adam.
Thank you. I want to thank ICMIF for inviting me to make this presentation. Good news is no slides. So you can sit back, close your eyes, and reflect upon the concept that scaring is caring, and I will try to fulfill on that promise. So to start, who am I? Well, I'm Adam Levin. I'm chairman and founder of CyberScout. Now, I know there are some of you that saw my name and perhaps mispronounced it in your thinking process and got all excited because you thought that the lead singer of Maroon 5 and a judge on The Voice was going to be here today. I regret that I disappoint you, but the good news is when you go home, you can tell your kids you were at a conference that Adam Levine spoke at, and you'll be heroes. The second thing is, who are we? We're CyberScout. I founded the company in 2003. It is the only company that was founded at the time with a core competence in resolution, basically putting people and organizations back together again after cyber incidents. We started originally with the name Identity Theft 911. That scared the heck out of our clients. We changed to IDT 911. Then people thought we were an alarm company. And we have now morphed to CyberScout, because we have also moved toward software as service as one of our core capacities. And 911 means nothing in most countries. Either they think it's some strange number or it in some way relates to September 11th. It does not. So let me begin by saying that during the 2016 US presidential election, Americans spent more time talking about building a wall on the Mexican border than about cybersecurity. While 52 jurisdictions in the United States have now passed breach notification laws, and a number of states have enacted data protection legislation, the US government has not. As a nation, the United States has not done enough regarding cybersecurity, but the EU is different. While the EU came late to the breach notification party, privacy and data protection have been seen as major issues in Brussels since 1995. Now, we've heard today about big data and the ways that AI can make it more useful and cost-effective for organizations. But what happens when the aggregated data of billions of people becomes exposed and leaves them vulnerable to hackers, scammers, and identity thieves? The bigger the data, the bigger the target. Cybercrime is a $400 billion business this year and must be viewed in much larger terms than financial fraud. Last fall, a massive distributed denial of service attack hit the company DIN and literally shut down some of the largest websites in the world for a better part of a day. This past May, the largest ransomware attack in history, known as WannaCry, affected hundreds of thousands of computers and froze the British national health system in its tracks. And just a week ago, hackers unleashed yet another massive denial of service attack against the Swedish public transportation system, dragging it to a halt. The insurance industry enjoys a privileged position in the European economy and in European society. Where you lead, Europe may follow. The insurance community must show the way because you are not only simply leaders, you are targets. After the recently announced Equifax breach, one that exposed the most sensitive data of 145 million people, including 700,000 British citizens, if you fail to address cybersecurity, Brussels and EU member nations are watching you. Now you have a choice. You and the organizations you insure can either proactively create a cybersecurity regime with strength and vision, or EU member nations will punish you and your clients. So let me tell you a little about what works in cybersecurity, so that you can effectively regulate yourselves and your policyholders rather than suffer the consequences of failing to comply with the GDPR. First things first, recognize the problem. Breaches have become the third certainty in life behind death and taxes. Cyber war has replaced the Cold War. Just ask Vladimir Putin. And the only solution is cultural. Now, what is a cultural solution? It means that everyone must participate. We need to start working together because in a world where a single employee error can expose millions of consumer records to hackers, we must all be part of the solution. Today, we live in a cyber world surrounded by 8 billion and increasing daily hackable devices. While our technology makes us powerful, it also makes us vulnerable. We have experienced a supernova-like expansion of our collective attackable surface. Every minute of every day, we are all under assault, government, business, and consumers. We cannot see the enemy. Often we have no idea of who or where it, he, she, or they are. They may be working on behalf of a nation state. They may be collectively doing it for profit. They may be terrorists. And with all due respect to President Trump, they may be the proverbial 200-kilogram hacker on a bed in his mother's basement in Eastern Europe. Nameless and faceless, they are creative, sophisticated, and persistent. They are armed, they are weaponized, and they are motivated. Their goal may be to undermine legitimate governments, gather intelligence information, or steal money, trade secrets, or intellectual property. Criminal enterprises, as well as small-time crooks, are looking to pilfer credit cards, hijack credit lines, divert tax refunds, access medical benefits. Career criminals will assume an identity in order to elude capture, often leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that leads back to the identity theft victim. Now, my next statement may surprise you. While the Equifax breach was a watershed, it was not a floodgate. Before Equifax, countless reported and unreported breaches and leaks across the globe had exposed billions of records, over 4.2 billion in 2016 alone, containing personal sensitive information costing governments, businesses, and consumers literally trillions of dollars. All of the personal information necessary to commit fraud and subject tens of millions to the horrors of identity theft was already out there as a result of bad corporate cyber hygiene, which I'll discuss in a moment, and equally bad consumer conduct, such as oversharing on social media, shoddy password practices, and other cybersecurity fails. CyberScout and the Identity Theft Resource Center estimate that in 2017, over 1,500 data breaches will occur in the United States alone. This is more than double the number in 2015. It is impossible to estimate the number of breaches in the EU or around the globe because some members have disclosure requirements, but most do not yet. The result? Our collective personally identifiable data has long been adrift in the criminal food chain like a shoal of plankton waiting to be scooped up. Another important fact, phishing attacks will keep coming day and night. The targets will be you, your partner or spouse, your children, your friends, your employees, your contractors, or your vendors. Information security matters, and employees must be warned against the dangers of phishing email and the cornucopia of bad cyber hygiene that can result in a data compromise. This is what should be discussed on a daily basis in HR departments across the world, because daily, the threat level is extremely high. Let's take a lesson from the security alerts of World War II. Loose lips sink ships, and be like dad, keep mum. Today, sadly, at least in the US, we say incompetence begets Equifax. But try finding a good rhyme for long and strong passwords, two-factor authentication, or secure Wi-Fi connection. Criminals and spies will go through your rubbish, your postbox, and your inbox. They will freeze your digital reality with ransomware. They will come at you online, by phone, even in person, to trick you into an info overshare. They will probe your networks with botnets. They will hack into your Internet of Things devices. They target your biggest flaw, being human. They will pose as civil servants, banks, retailers, even your boss, or perhaps present themselves as Microsoft or Apple. They rely on distraction. We all have families, schedules, and day jobs. To them, we are their day job. And here's what they know. People click on the wrong link. They use easily decipherable passwords. They don't enable two-factor authentication. They use the same simple password for everything. They keep location services on. They answer security questions honestly, answers that a hacker can easily provide if a person overshares online. They don't freeze their credit, and they don't shred sensitive documents. So here's where this all leads. You turn on your computer, and there's a skull staring back at you. A countdown clock ticks away. There are less than 90 hours to pay a ransom or lose everything on your server. Make it a little worse. You're the CEO of Sony or the NHS. According to U.S. government statistics, ransomware attacks in the U.S. spiked 300% in 2016, with over 4,000 attacks a day. Doubtless, EU statistics would estimate more. Maybe you're the CFO, and you discover that the email you got at the end of the day from your boss directing you to wire a significant sum of money to a foreign bank with which you dutifully complied wasn't actually from your boss. One public company lost $46 million. Google and Facebook combined wired $100 million to a company with almost the same name as a vendor that they used in Asia. Or maybe you're the head of HR, and that email from the CFO requesting all employee W-2 information for which you have a responsibility, with which you dutifully complied, was not from the CFO, but from a hacker. In every case, someone was spearphished. Some 90% of breaches are customized to their target. Hackers scout their target, get to know the players, use social engineering, implant malware, determine the access rights of various employees, determine points of ingress and egress for data, and then exfiltrate it. No one wants to acknowledge this, but it must be acknowledged. Every organization has or will suffer breach of some kind, and we have to assume that every individual has already been compromised, perhaps multiple times. It's important when considering points of vulnerability that you think beyond hacking and phishing. There are more mundane yet equally concerning lapses. An InfoSec compromise can include a lost or stolen file, or a computer or smartphone. It can be as simple as an unshredded document that snuck out of the building in the trash. Well, how do we combat this? Well, the easy and wrong answer is to spend a fortune on technology. Bruce Schneier, from the Electronic Frontier Foundation in Harvard, said it best. If you think throwing money at technology can solve your security problems, then you don't understand security and you don't understand the technology. And when it comes to security, to paraphrase Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is all about your corporate culture. You need to instill a culture that puts security front and center from the mailroom to the boardroom, where everyone in the organization feels a sense of ownership. And ownership is a state of mind that requires upkeep and vigilance to protect what's yours. This is my area, and I'm in charge. Ownership fosters security. It's a trickle-down process, but culture is slow. A strong corporate culture of security is and should remain a work in progress. It's a marathon, not a 30-day sprint. Now, in my book, Swipe, I talked about the 3 M's. How do you minimize your risk of exposure, monitor your attackable surface, and manage the damage? The 3 M's apply to the group as well as the individual. Because a business can do everything right, but one untrained, lazy, or clueless employee can seriously harm an organization, and with it, hundreds of thousands or even millions of employees and customers. So you must always be asking these questions. Is there a security technology that we've overlooked? Have we invested enough bandwidth to employ information security awareness training? Are we doing the right things to reduce our attackable surface? Are we properly monitoring privileged accounts? Breaches are caused by human error, but regardless of the technological security of any system, we, humans, are the weakest link. Malicious actors or insufficient awareness training. So who's at fault? Take a moment to contemplate this. Mobile devices are considered key points of vulnerability, yet many organizations, while extremely concerned about breaches, allow employees to bring their own devices and to connect them to secure systems that contain sensitive information on employees, customers, partners, intellectual property, and trade secrets. There are no prohibitions against downloading unverified apps, no mandates as to what security software should be deployed on such devices. Let's look at other key ways that data can be exposed in an organization. When a database is hacked, when a laptop or stolen device is lost, when an employee sends sensitive information to the wrong recipient, when sensitive data is accidentally made publicly accessible, when backup data is lost or stolen, when third-party vendors make you vulnerable, and always remember, when your vendor is hacked, you are hacked. When documents, devices, or data are improperly destroyed, when employees make mistakes. So let's review the 3 M's in a little bit more depth. 1, minimize your risk of exposure. Be proactive. Do a risk assessment. Develop and implement an enterprise-wide process to identify and assess threats, vulnerabilities, attacks, probabilities of occurrence, and outcomes. Always design systems with the end in mind, and the end must always be privacy and security. Teach your employees the importance of data security. It is as essential as the air we breathe. Your employees can be your greatest strength or your biggest weakness. They are the first point of attack, and they can be your last line of defense. In short, your employees are central to your cybersecurity. You just may not have realized it yet. Layer your security, limit access, and enforce strong password protocols. Your network should always be asking, do I know you? Should I know you? Two-factor authentication helps keep your system safe. Data should be segmented. It should be need to use. Outside devices must meet your security standards before they're allowed to connect to your systems. Empower everyone to maintain these security standards while holding everyone accountable. This should extend to physical security as well. If you see something, say something. Keep only the data you need for only as long as you need it. And above all, listen to the experts. They actually know what they're doing. Data security is a daily responsibility, and tomorrow is a new day, so pay attention. Number 2, monitor your attackable surface. Your defenses must be strong because a hacker only needs one entry point to wreak havoc. Monitor your network to ensure it remains robust and current. Constantly scan your systems for vulnerabilities, perform penetration testing, and make sure no security holes are created when you do updates or upgrades. Always question, always verify, never trust. And number 3, manage the damage. Think Game of Thrones. A breach is coming. You must have a plan and a few dragons. A plan that empowers you to rapidly detect a cyber intrusion, minimize all related costs and collateral damage, patch the weaknesses that were exploited, restore IT services, address required notifications, communicate in a timely fashion with mandated regulators, and redress consumer and employee grievances in an urgent, transparent, and empathetic manner. Your response team should include employees and consultants with IT, media, crisis management, and people skills. Your plan should be flexible, robust, and frequently updated. Different scenarios should be gamed, then drilled. Teams should be drilled like sailors on a nuclear submarine so that their response effectively becomes muscle memory. Cyber insurance is practically becoming mandatory. And here's where everyone in this room has the greatest opportunity to do very well and to be responsible for significant good. Cyber insurance must never be considered a substitute for an effective data security program. Your policyholders must be made to understand that coverage will be denied if they cannot demonstrate that proper security protocols were followed. It is also in everyone's best interest that policyholders have sufficient insurance coverage to cover all costs of a breach, including notification of all those exposed. And coverage should be sufficiently comprehensive to help policyholders, their customers, and employees navigate the aftermath of a breach. Incident reporting. There are a host of time-sensitive reporting requirements that must be met in order to comply with regulators and should also be a prerequisite to the maintenance of their insurance coverage. In the U.S. alone, there are 52 separate jurisdictions, as I said before, that have some form of data breach notification law. While many have the same requirements, several have different points of contact or reporting time frames. And also, depending upon the type of institution or the data compromised, there are several federal laws with which to comply. And that becomes even more complicated when the GDPR becomes effective in April. Failure to comply will result in some or all of the following: regulatory penalties, in the case of the GDPR, draconian, reputational damage, loss of business, loss of insurance coverage, exposure to class action litigation. While daunting, this can be managed with solid guidance by a trusted third-party provider. The manner in which an organization responds to a breach is a defining moment. A proper response requires effective communication, playing it straight with regulators, and doing right by customers and employees. Be honest, be accessible, and understand that many will be terrified and almost all will be angry. Do not offer cookie-cutter solutions. The dangers extend far beyond fines, penalties, regulatory interactions, and litigation. Any organization that fails to respond urgently, transparently, and empathetically will suffer an enormous loss, and this is the erosion of trust by partners, consumers, employees, and could become an extinction level or near extinction level event. The threat is real, it's current, it's evolving, it must be respected, and it must be confronted. At this moment in history, we have a unique opportunity. perhaps a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do the thing we do while incenting organizations to be good corporate citizens and thereby better protecting society as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I think we're all sufficiently scared now, for sure. In fact, I saw a number of you sort of fiddling with your phones. I'm sure you were changing your passwords as you were speaking. I'm thinking of changing the name of my next dog, actually, to some combination of letters and numbers rather than... my current dog's called Baxter. Guess what my password is? Shouldn't be saying that, but there you go. I think we're just about up on time. Where I was going to go, and probably without stealing Mike's lines, I thought it would have been an interesting debate, and this may be something that you want to contemplate over lunch, but Mike's sort of opening a couple of challenges, really. I mean, we're all technologists now. Well, certainly, even I'm feeling a technologist at the end of this session. You three guys already were. But Mike's points were not executing fast enough. That would have been quite an interesting topic to actually debate on the panel, and then whether we or you, as the mutual sector, are in a unique position to develop and implement these technologies compared with other, other forms of ownership. But I don't think there is time to debate that, so we'll leave those as rhetorical questions. So I'll just ask you to thank our three presenters in the normal way. Thank you.
Nick, thank you for chairing that, and a bit of a disparate. We were on pricing underwriting in the first couple presentations, and this wake-up call on security and cybersecurity, which we probably need to hear a message like that once a month to remind us of the cultural point that, Adam, I think you've made so eloquently, that this is really about culture and people and getting people to behave differently. One question before we break on the pricing and underwriting, back on the pricing and underwriting that Gundula and David, you spoke about. How far are we going to go in seeing the AI, machine learning, replacing frontline underwriting? And all of the judgment and the art that we've been used to, whether on the non-life or the life side. How far will this go in terms of eliminating underwriters?
Maybe it will not eliminate all underwriters, but they have more skilled work to do. So the maybe unskilled work, when you have to search for different information, that is, of course, less. And you can concentrate on other topics or on more human, related topics. In general, if your company is not so far with using technology, then, of course, it can replace some of the less skilled work. But in general, you have to have in the future more educated people for your insurance task.
Thank you. David?
Yes, it's a bit the same. We continue to have human, and the human is very important, and the added value of those people is still very important in the relationship that we have with the members. So exactly the same.
So it's a little bit of a reinforcement, at least from these two panelists, on that frontline underwriter is going to have a role going forward, despite the fact that they will be augmented by the machines. And I think we've got to remember there's always for our members, there's a human on the other side. And still, though, I don't want to skip over that judgment from this group that the underwriting and pricing area, Nick, if I remember it correctly, was the area in which technology would be affected the most. So we're going to see a lot of changes in this area going forward. So with that, one more round of applause for this group.